Hey guys, welcome aboard to Just Sleep Stories. Tonight we're polishing armour, tightening saddles and riding straight into one of history's most misunderstood job descriptions, the life of a medieval knight. Not the movie version with perfect hair and slow-motion sword fights. Not the heroic poster boy version galloping across green hills while orchestral music swells. I mean the real version. The sweaty, lice-infested, sleep-deprived version. The one where your armour smells like a damp kitchen sponge and your horse has better living conditions than you do. So before we march off into battle and deeply questionable hygiene practices, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy these little historical adventures, and if you feel like it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing how many people around the world are trying to fall asleep while learning that history was essentially one long series of unfortunate life choices. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, get comfortable, and let your shoulders sink into the pillow. If you have a blanket, pull it up nice and cozy, because tonight we're travelling somewhere cold, muddy, and deeply inconvenient. Let's pause for a moment and ask some important questions. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to wear 60 pounds of metal while trying to fight someone who also weighs 60 pounds more than usual because they're wrapped in cookware? Have you ever tried sleeping in armour? Or worse, trying to use the bathroom in armour? What did knights actually eat between heroic battles? Was it roasted turkey and goblets of wine? Or something closer to stale bread and a stew that may or may not have contained a shoe? How do you train to become a knight? Is it glamorous sword practice at sunrise, or 10 years of doing chores for someone who treats you like a medieval intern? And what about the horse? Your entire career depends on a very large animal with opinions, moods, and the ability to step on your foot like a falling brick. And then there's the small matter of battle itself. Ever tried breathing heavily inside a metal bucket while someone swings a mace at your head? So tonight, we'll gently wander through the real daily life of a medieval knight. The glory, the mud, the smells, the politics, and the deeply questionable career path that thousands of young men once thought sounded like a great idea. And now, congratulations! You've just woken up in the year 1347. Your pillow is a sack of straw, your back hurts, your armour is somewhere nearby smelling like regret. And someone outside is already shouting about training. Welcome to nightlife. Good luck. You wake up to the gentle medieval alarm clock known as someone banging a wooden bucket down a hallway. Your bed is not exactly a bed. It's more of a suggestion of a bed. A sack of straw that has slowly compressed over time into something roughly equivalent to sleeping on a bag of crunchy noodles. The room is cold, the stone walls are sweating with moisture, and somewhere nearby a draught is whistling through a crack like the castle itself is sighing about its life choices. The first smell that greets you is a complex bouquet of damp wool, horse, smoke, and humanity that hasn't discovered deodorant yet. Congratulations, you are a medieval knight. Or at least you're on the long road to becoming one, and that road starts not with glory, but with waking up sore, slightly itchy, and already wondering why your mattress seems to be moving. Spoiler, it's probably fleas. You lie there for a moment, staring up at the wooden beams overhead, trying to remember what comfort feels like. The straw under your back rustles when you shift, releasing a faint puff of dust, and possibly something that was once a feather, but is now more of a historical artifact. Somewhere down the corridor a rooster crows, which would be charming if it wasn't immediately followed by a man coughing like he just swallowed a chimney. Castles are not quiet places. They are busy, drafty stone machines designed for defence rather than relaxation. The walls are thick, the windows are narrow, and every sound echoes through the hallways like the building is gossiping about you. Footsteps pass outside your chamber. Someone shouts about horses. Someone else argues about bread. And somewhere nearby, a dog barks at absolutely nothing, which in medieval castles is apparently a full-time job. You sit up slowly, your joints cracking like a bundle of twigs. Even if you're young, your body already feels like it has signed up for a long career of soreness. Training, riding, lifting armour, falling off horses, this is not exactly a spa retreat. The floor beneath your feet is cold stone. There are no fluffy rugs, no heated floors, just medieval reality. You stretch your shoulders and feel a faint stiffness from yesterday's training session. Someone had the bright idea of practicing with heavier wooden swords, which seemed like a good plan until your arm started shaking halfway through. And this is just the morning. Across the room sits a pile of clothing that smells faintly like smoke and strongly like horse. You pull on a wool tunic that feels a little scratchy, but at least it's warm. Warm is good. Warm is survival. You glance toward the small window. Outside, dawn is creeping across the courtyard. The sky is pale grey, and a thin mist hangs over the stone walls. It's peaceful, in a medieval sort of way, meaning it looks calm, but at any moment someone might announce a training session, a hunting trip, or a small war. You step into the corridor where other members of the household are already moving about. Servants carry buckets. A stable boy runs past with a saddle over his shoulder. The smell of wood smoke drifts through the air. And as you make your way toward the courtyard, one thought slowly settles in your mind. This is nightlife. Not the shining armour yet. Not the heroic battle. Just cold mornings, creaky bones, and the faint suspicion that something in your bed had more legs than you do. And honestly, the day has barely started. Before you were a knight, before the armour and the horse and the dramatic trumpet music, you were something far less glamorous. A small child handed over to another noble household to start your training. At the age when modern children are learning multiplication tables and arguing about bedtime, you were shipped off to become a page, which is medieval language for tiny assistant who carries things and tries not to trip over swords. Your day mostly consists of errands, lessons in manners, and learning how to serve food without spilling stew on someone who technically has the authority to send you into battle later. It's like an internship that lasts several years, except instead of a coffee machine, you have a training yard and a lot of people yelling about posture. Imagine being 7 years old. 7. At that age today, most kids are negotiating for an extra cookie or figuring out how to beat a level in a video game. But in the medieval world, 7 is apparently the perfect age to begin a lifelong career in professional sword swinging. Your parents, likely minor nobles with ambitions for their family, send you away to live in the household of a more powerful lord. The reasoning is simple. If you grow up surrounded by knights, you might eventually become one. It's networking. Very medieval networking. Your first job as a page involves observing everything and doing almost anything. You carry messages, you serve meals, you help prepare equipment, and most importantly, you learn how to behave like a noble. This means mastering the fine art of standing politely for long periods of time while adults talk about politics, land, and occasionally whether someone's cousin insulted someone else's goat. You are taught table manners, religious prayers, and basic reading if you're lucky enough to live in a household that values education. But the real lessons are physical. You start learning how to ride a horse. At first it's less heroic knight galloping across the field, and more small human clinging to saddle, while horse questions your leadership. You also begin practicing with wooden weapons, small swords, practice spears, shields that feel enormous in your child-sized arms. Training is slow and repetitive. Swing, step, balance, again, again, again. Your instructors are patient, to a point. They expect discipline because one day your life may depend on these skills. But for now, you are still a child trying to remember which end of the training sword is supposed to be dangerous. Meanwhile, your chores continue. You help the household servants with tasks. You assist squires and knights when they need something carried. You watch carefully when armour is cleaned or weapons are prepared. Every moment is a lesson. Every mistake is corrected. And slowly, year by year, you grow stronger, more confident, and more accustomed to the rhythms of noble life. The castles, the training yards, the endless noise of daily activity. By the time you reach your early teens, something interesting has happened. You no longer feel like a guest. You feel like part of the system. You know the rules. You understand the expectations. And most importantly, you have learned that becoming a knight is not about a single heroic moment. It's about years of preparation, years of discipline, years of carrying things for other people, which, if we're honest, sounds suspiciously like most career paths throughout history. Around your teenage years, you graduate from page to squire, which is a big step up in responsibility and a big step down in personal comfort. As a squire, your main job is to assist a fully grown knight. This includes polishing armour, maintaining weapons, preparing horses, and generally following this heavily armoured human everywhere, like a very loyal, slightly overworked shadow. Think of it as being a medieval personal assistant, except your boss might ask you to help strap him into 80 pounds of metal and then ride with him into battle. It's a mentorship program with significantly more chances of being accidentally hit with a mace. The moment you become a squire, life changes. Suddenly you're not just observing knights, you're responsible for helping one. A specific knight is assigned to you, and your job is to assist him with nearly everything related to his work. You maintain his equipment, you help him dress for battle, you prepare his horse, and sometimes you ride with him during campaigns or tournaments, which is both thrilling and terrifying. Because now the training yard is no longer just practice, it's preparation for real danger. Your mornings begin early, armour must be inspected, leather straps checked, blades cleaned and sharpened. Medieval weapons are not low-maintenance objects. They rust, dull, and break if neglected. And if a knight rides into battle with poorly maintained gear, well, let's just say that reflects very badly on the squire. So you become meticulous. You learn how every buckle fits, how every plate of armour overlaps, how every weapon should feel in the hand. There is a certain pride in this work. When your knight rides into the courtyard fully equipped, everything shining and secure, you know you played a part in that. Of course, there are less glamorous moments too. Armour is heavy, very heavy. Lifting it repeatedly is a workout disguised as a chore, and cleaning armour after battle. Well, let's just say the combination of sweat, mud, and battlefield debris creates a smell that historians politely refer to as authentic. You also continue your own training. Sword practice becomes more intense. Riding drills become faster and more complicated. You practice mounting horses in armour. You practice fighting on foot. Sometimes you spar with other squires, which usually ends with someone lying on the ground wondering how the other person managed to hit them in the helmet. But slowly confidence grows. You move better. You react faster. Your muscles adapt to the constant physical demands. And one day, your knight might look at you during training and nod approvingly, which in medieval culture is basically the equivalent of a 5-star performance review. You're getting closer. Not quite a knight yet, but no longer just a boy carrying swords. Now you're part of the machine. Let's talk about armour, because it's one of the most iconic parts of knight life, and also one of the least comfortable pieces of clothing ever invented. A full suit of armour is heavy, restrictive, and traps heat like a portable oven. Underneath it, you're wearing padded clothing that absorbs sweat like a sponge. After a few hours, the inside of your armor begins to feel less like heroic protection and more like a metal greenhouse where your body is the tomato plant. Every movement clanks. Every step reminds you that gravity is still very committed to its job. First comes the padded garment known as a gambeson. It looks harmless enough. Just a thick quilted jacket designed to cushion blows and prevent the armor from rubbing your skin raw. But it's also warm, very warm, which might be pleasant on a cold morning. But once the rest of the armor goes on, things change quickly. Over the gambeson come the various metal pieces: breastplate, backplate, arm guards, leg plates, helmet. Each piece is carefully strapped into place. It takes time, usually several minutes and often the assistance of a squire, because putting on full armor alone is a bit like trying to assemble a metal puzzle while wearing oven mitts. Once everything is secured, you stand there for a moment, heavy, protected, and suddenly aware that bending down to pick something up will now require careful planning. Walking in armor is possible. Running is ambitious. Climbing stairs is a negotiation between physics and determination. And sitting down. Let's just say knights learn to sit very carefully. But the real challenge is heat. Metal traps warmth. The gambeson traps warmth. And your body, doing the hard work of moving all this weight around, produces even more warmth. Before long, sweat begins to collect. Then more sweat. Then a truly impressive amount of sweat. By midday, the inside of your armor has developed its own climate system, and unfortunately there is no quick way to take it off during a battle or tournament, so you endure, clanking, sweating, trying to look heroic while secretly wishing for a strong breeze. Still, there's one comforting thought. If someone swings a sword at you, the armor might actually save your life, which makes the sauna experience slightly more acceptable. Slightly. Training as a knight means endless practice with weapons that were specifically designed to ruin someone's afternoon. Swords, spears, maces, axes. Each one requires balance, timing, and the ability to stay on your feet while wearing equipment that weighs roughly as much as a small child. The training yard is a symphony of clanging metal, shouted instructions, and the occasional thud of someone discovering that armor may protect you, but it does not prevent embarrassment. The training yard wakes up early. Before the sun has fully climbed above the castle walls, instructors are already pacing the dirt with the focused energy of people who believe discipline builds character. You step onto the packed earth, weapon in hand. Most training begins with basic drills, footwork, positioning, balance. Because no matter how impressive a sword looks, if your feet slip at the wrong moment, the fight ends very quickly. You practice stepping forward and back, turning, raising your shield, blocking strikes. It sounds simple, until you try doing it for an hour straight while wearing armor. Your muscles begin to complain. Your arms grow heavy. Your breathing becomes louder inside your helmet. But the instructors keep shouting encouragement, or criticism, sometimes both. Then come the sparring matches. You face another trainee with a practice weapon. Wooden swords are common. They are safer than steel, but still very capable of delivering a memorable bruise. The signal is given, and suddenly you're moving. Strike, block, step. Your opponent lunges, you try to parry. There's a loud clack as the weapons collide, and occasionally someone misjudges a distance and both of you stumble awkwardly into the dirt, which happens more often than the heroic painting suggests. Still, every session builds skill. Your reactions sharpen. Your confidence grows. You begin to understand how battles might unfold. And by the end of training, when the instructors finally call for a break, everyone stands there breathing heavily, armor creaking, helmets slightly crooked, faces flushed, looking less like legendary warriors and more like very tired people who've been hitting each other with sticks all morning. And honestly, that's a pretty accurate preview of medieval combat. Knights don't just fight on foot. Much of their reputation comes from fighting on horseback, which means your relationship with your horse is extremely important. This animal is your transportation, your battlefield advantage, and occasionally the reason you survive the day. War horses are trained carefully and treated with surprising respect, partly because they are expensive, and partly because upsetting a horse that weighs half a ton is generally considered poor decision-making. You meet your horse long before any battlefield, in the stables, where the air smells of hay, leather, and the steady warmth of animals who have absolutely no idea they're participating in medieval military strategy. Your horse is not just any horse. For knights, the ideal mount is a trained warhorse, often called a destrier. These animals are strong, disciplined, and surprisingly intelligent. They're trained to remain calm during loud noises, sudden movements, and the general chaos of combat, which, frankly, is more emotional stability than most humans bring to the battlefield. Your training together begins slowly. You learn how the horse responds to reins, pressure from your legs, and voice commands. You practice mounting and dismounting, at first without armour, later with armour, which adds a whole new layer of complexity. Climbing onto a horse while wearing 40 or 50 pounds of metal is an activity that requires both technique and a small amount of faith. Sometimes the horse cooperates beautifully. Sometimes the horse shifts at exactly the wrong moment, and you end up looking like a heavily armoured acrobat. Still, over time, a partnership forms. You begin to recognise the horse's moods, when it's calm, when it's nervous, when it's looking at you as if to say, "I hope you know what you're doing." In battle, this partnership matters enormously. A trained horse can charge forward with power and precision. It can turn quickly. It can remain steady while weapons clash nearby. And occasionally it can save you by moving faster than the person trying to hit you. Back in the castle stables, you help with the care, brushing the coat, checking the hooves, making sure the saddle and harness are secure. Because a healthy horse is not just an asset, it's your teammate, your co-worker, your medieval transportation system, and possibly the most reliable employee in the entire castle. Eventually morning training ends and it's time for food. Breakfast for a knight is rarely glamorous. There might be bread, some cheese, maybe leftover stew that has been reheated over a fire that also happens to be warming the room. The stew itself is a sort of culinary mystery box. It might contain vegetables, it might contain meat, it might contain something that someone insists is a vegetable, but looks suspiciously like part of a shoe. Meals in a castle are practical affairs. Food must feed many people, often with ingredients that depend heavily on the season and whatever supplies are available. Bread is common, usually coarse and dense, made from grains that might include barley, rye, or wheat depending on the region. It's sturdy bread, the kind that could double as a construction material if necessary. Cheese appears frequently as well. Hard cheeses that store well and provide valuable calories for people doing physically demanding work. Then there's the stew. Stew is the backbone of medieval cuisine. Vegetables, bits of meat, herbs, onions, beans, whatever is available, gets tossed into a pot and simmered for hours, sometimes days. Some kitchens maintain a pot that is continually replenished, with new ingredients added as old ones are eaten. Which means today's stew might contain echoes of yesterday's stew, and possibly last week's stew. It's the medieval version of a slow cooker that has commitment issues. Still, it's filling, and after hours of training you're very hungry. You tear off a chunk of bread, dip it into the stew. The warmth spreads through your body almost immediately. Nearby, other members of the household are eating as well. Knights, servants, squires. The room buzzes with quiet conversation. Plans for the day, discussions about horses, someone complaining about a sore shoulder, someone else laughing about a training mishap earlier that morning. The atmosphere is surprisingly relaxed, because before the politics, before the responsibilities, before the next training session, everyone just needs breakfast, even nights. Bathing in the medieval world is not exactly a daily ritual. Water must be heated, tubs must be prepared, and frankly, most people are busy doing other things like surviving. Knights, despite their status, are not immune to the realities of the era. Armour traps sweat, training creates dirt, and laundry is not exactly a high-speed process. The result is a social environment where everyone politely ignores the fact that everyone smells. Impressive. Bathing does happen, just not every day. Heating enough water for a bath requires time, firewood, and effort. Servants must haul buckets. Fires must be maintained. Tubs must be filled. Which means baths are more like special occasions than casual routines. When a bath is prepared, it can actually be quite pleasant. Warm water, soap made from animal fat and ashes, perhaps some herbs added for fragrance. You lower yourself into the tub and feel muscles relax after days of training, but the experience is temporary, because once the water cools, the bath is over, and in large households multiple people might use the same bath water. Yes, exactly what you're imagining. Laundry presents another challenge. Clothing is washed, but not constantly. Wool garments are durable but slow to dry. Armour padding absorbs sweat and requires airing out, which means the general atmosphere inside castles includes a rich mixture of smells. Smoke from fireplaces, animals from the stables, leather, metal, people. It's not unbearable. Mostly because everyone smells roughly the same. There's a strange equality in that. Still, certain efforts are made. Perfumed oils, herbs placed in rooms, fresh straw spread across floors to absorb moisture and odours. These little details help keep the environment manageable, but make no mistake, medieval hygiene is a far cry from modern showers. You cannot simply turn a knob and enjoy endless hot water. Instead, cleanliness is a careful balance of effort, resources, and patience, and occasionally, holding your breath. Your sword is not just a weapon, it's a status symbol, a tool, and something you absolutely do not want to neglect. Blades must be cleaned, sharpened, and protected from rust. This means regular maintenance, careful storage, and a lot of time spent making sure your equipment remains battle-ready. After training or combat, your sword receives attention. First comes cleaning. Blades collect dirt, moisture, and sometimes more unpleasant substances during use. These must be wiped away carefully to prevent corrosion. A cloth and oil are often used to keep the metal smooth and protected. Then comes sharpening. A dull blade is not only ineffective, it's dangerous. Using whetstones, you carefully run the edge of the blade across the stone at the correct angle, back and forth, slowly, patiently. The process takes time, but it ensures the weapon remains ready. You inspect the hilt as well. Leather wrapping, metal fittings. Everything must be secure, because the last thing anyone wants during a fight is for their sword to develop structural doubts. When finished, the blade is returned to its scabbard, often lined with wood and leather to protect the metal from moisture. This routine becomes almost meditative. Cleaning, sharpening, inspecting. For knights, weapons are tools of survival. Treat them well, and they might return the favour. Life inside a castle is full of invisible battles. Noble families compete for influence, alliances shift constantly, and every conversation has layers of meaning. As a knight, you're not only a warrior, but also part of a political system where loyalty, reputation, and timing can determine your future. A knight's loyalty usually belongs to a lord, but lords themselves serve greater powers. Kings, dukes, powerful families with complicated histories. This creates a web of alliances and rivalries that can change quickly. One day you're guarding a border. The next you might be riding to support a different noble in a dispute over land or inheritance. Inside the castle, conversations reflect these tensions. At dinner tables, in corridors, during private meetings behind heavy wooden doors. Who supports whom? Who might betray whom? Who is gaining favour with the king? As a knight, you must navigate this world carefully. Skill in battle is important, but reputation and loyalty are equally valuable. A brave knight with poor judgment can easily find himself serving the wrong master. So you listen, you observe, you speak carefully, because sometimes the most dangerous battles are not fought with swords, they're fought with words and timing. Life inside a castle is full of invisible battles. Noble families compete for influence, alliances shift constantly, and every conversation has layers of meaning. As a knight, you're not only a warrior, but also part of a political system where loyalty, reputation, and timing can determine your future. At first, this surprises you. When you imagined becoming a knight, you pictured battlefields, shining armor, and heroic charges across grassy hills, while someone in the distance played a very dramatic trumpet. What you did not imagine was standing quietly against a wall while two nobles argue politely about sheep. But welcome to the true battlefield of medieval life, the dining hall. Castles are not just homes, they are political headquarters. Every visitor who rides through the gate carries news, requests, alliances, or grudges that may be older than the castle itself. As a knight serving a lord, you exist inside this web of relationships. Your loyalty belongs to your lord. Your lord owes loyalty to a higher noble, perhaps a duke, perhaps directly to a king. That king might currently be feuding with another king, which means that somehow, without ever planning it, you're now part of a political situation involving 3 counties, 2 marriage alliances, and a suspiciously contested wheat field. You begin to notice that conversations in the castle rarely mean exactly what they sound like. A noble praising another lord's horses might actually be commenting on his military strength. A casual question about harvest yields could be a polite way of asking how much tax money might be available next season. And a marriage proposal between 2 noble families is less about love and more about land, alliances, and making sure nobody suddenly decides to invade. You also learn the importance of reputation. In the medieval world, a knight's reputation travels almost as quickly as rumours. If you are known as brave and loyal, doors open. Lords trust you with responsibilities. You might lead soldiers, guard important locations, or carry messages between powerful families. But if you're known for arrogance, poor judgment, or betrayal, well, suddenly invitations disappear, support fades, and being a knight without allies is a little like being a knight without armor. Technically possible, but not recommended. So you watch, you listen, you speak carefully, you learn which nobles dislike each other, which alliances are fragile, and which topics are best avoided entirely during dinner. Because sometimes the most dangerous fight in the castle is not fought with swords, it's fought with smiles and carefully chosen words. Frankly, it's exhausting. You almost miss the training yard. Not every fight is a battlefield. Tournaments are the medieval version of professional sports mixed with social networking. Knights compete in jousts and contests to display skill, win prizes, and impress powerful spectators. When a tournament is announced, the mood across the region changes almost immediately. Messengers ride between castles spreading the news. Knights begin preparing their armor. Stable yards become busier as horses are trained and inspected, because tournaments are not just entertainment, they are opportunities. Winning a tournament can bring prize money, recognition, and sometimes the favour of powerful nobles who might be watching from the stands. In other words, it's a medieval career fair. But instead of handing out business cards, you're trying to knock someone off a horse with a 12-foot lance. Preparation begins weeks in advance. First comes equipment inspection. Your armour must be polished until it gleams in the sunlight, not just for vanity, but because tournaments are public displays. Appearance matters. Your lance must be balanced correctly. Too heavy and it becomes difficult to control. Too light and it might shatter too easily, which sounds convenient, until you realise that means it might shatter before hitting anything useful. Your horse receives special attention as well. A tournament horse must be strong, obedient and comfortable charging straight toward another armoured human, which, if we're being honest, is a fairly unreasonable request to make of any animal. Training sessions become intense. You practice galloping across open fields while holding a lance steady under your arm. Your instructor shouts reminders about posture, grip and balance. You try to focus while also remembering that falling off a galloping horse in armour is a fairly effective way to ruin an afternoon. Then come practice runs with other knights. Two riders charge toward each other at controlled speed. The goal is not necessarily to win the practice bout. The goal is to refine technique, how to lower the lance, how to aim for the opponent's shield, how to absorb the shock of impact without sliding sideways off your horse like a sack of potatoes. And trust me, the sack of potatoes scenario happens more often than the heroic paintings suggest. Meanwhile, the castle prepares for the social side of the tournament. Guests arrive from distant lands. Merchants set up stalls selling food, cloth and small luxuries. Musicians rehearse. Colourful banners are hung across the tournament field. For a few days the castle feels less like a fortress and more like a festival. And when the day finally arrives, you ride onto the field in polished armour. Crowds watch, trumpets sound. For a moment it feels exactly like the legends. Then someone hands you a lance, and you remember that the next few seconds involve charging directly toward another knight at full speed, which suddenly feels slightly less festive. Jousting is one of the most dramatic events in knight culture. Two riders charge toward each other with long lances, hoping to knock the other off their horse. It looks impressive, but it also involves enormous speed, sharp wood, and a lot of potential for bruises. The jousting field stretches out before you like a long corridor of packed earth. Down the centre runs the tilt, a wooden barrier separating the two riders. This prevents the horses from colliding head-on, which is good because two armoured horses crashing together would end the tournament very quickly. You guide your horse to the starting position. At the opposite end of the field your opponent waits. Both of you hold long wooden lances designed to splinter dramatically on impact. Ideally, because if the lance refuses to splinter, someone is probably going to have a memorable evening with the castle physician. A trumpet sounds. The crowd quiets. You lower your visor. Inside the helmet, your breathing suddenly becomes very loud. The metal shell echoes every inhale like you're trapped inside a cooking pot. The signal is given. Your horse leaps forward. Hooves thunder against the ground. The wind rushes past your armour. Your opponent grows larger in your field of vision. You lower the lance, aiming for his shield. There is a split second where everything slows. Then, crack. The lance shatters. Wood splinters fly. The shock travels through your arm and shoulder like someone just rang a bell inside your skeleton. If you're lucky, the impact knocks your opponent backward. If you're less lucky, nothing happens, and if you're extremely unlucky, you're suddenly lying in the dirt wondering why the sky is spinning. Because falling off a horse in armour is not graceful. You land, roll, attempt to stand up, and discover that armour, while excellent for protection, is not designed for elegant recovery. Still, when it works well, jousting is spectacular. The crowd cheers, banners wave, trumpets sound again, and for a brief moment you feel exactly like the legendary knights described in songs and stories. Then later that evening, when you remove your armour, you discover bruises in places you didn't realise could bruise. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight you survived the joust, which is honestly a solid achievement. Despite tournaments and training, real warfare is chaotic, dangerous, and often exhausting. Campaigns can last weeks or months, with long marches, uncomfortable camps, and constant uncertainty. When war begins, the excitement fades quickly. There are no colourful banners celebrating sportsmanship, no festive music, just soldiers gathering in courtyards, checking equipment, and preparing for a long journey. The army moves slowly across the countryside. Knights ride near the front with their squires and retainers. Behind them march infantry carrying spears and shields. Supply wagons creak along the road loaded with food, tools, and spare equipment. The journey itself is tiring. Horses must be cared for constantly. Armour needs maintenance, and the weather almost never cooperates. Rain turns dirt roads into mud. Cold winds cut through cloaks at night. Sometimes days pass without seeing the enemy, which sounds peaceful until you realise that the enemy could appear at any moment. When battle finally happens, it rarely resembles the orderly scenes painted in manuscripts. Instead, it is loud, confusing, chaotic, and horses scream, men shout, steel crashes against shields. Dust fills the air. You rely heavily on training. Your shield rises automatically when danger appears. Your horse moves instinctively beneath you. Your sword strikes when an opportunity opens. Moments blur together. You might charge forward, then retreat, then charge again. At some point, the balance shifts. One side begins to lose formation. Panic spreads. Soldiers start running, and suddenly the battle is over. Not because of a dramatic duel between champions, but because one army simply stops believing it can win. Afterward comes the quiet. Broken weapons lie scattered across the ground. Exhausted soldiers sit in the dirt, and everyone slowly realizes they survived something incredibly dangerous, which is not quite as glamorous as the song suggests. But it is very real. When travelling with an army, knights do not sleep in castles. They sleep in tents, under wagons, or sometimes simply on the ground wrapped in cloaks. The first night away from the castle feels strange. Instead of thick stone walls and narrow corridors, you're surrounded by open countryside and hundreds of tired soldiers setting up camp. Tents appear across the field like small cloth villages. Fires flicker as cooking begins. Voices drift through the night air. Some men laugh. Others sit quietly sharpening weapons. You find a spot near your companions and spread your cloak across the ground. It is not particularly comfortable. The earth is uneven. There are rocks. And somewhere nearby someone is snoring with the enthusiasm of a collapsing tower. Still, exhaustion wins. You fall asleep, lightly, because armies never truly rest. Guards patrol the edges of camp. Messengers arrive late in the night. Horses shift and stomp in their tethers. At any moment someone could shout an alarm. Morning arrives quickly, often before the sun. Fires are rekindled, horses are fed, breakfast is whatever food remains in the supply wagons. Then the march begins again. Day after day, miles of travel, dusty roads, heavy equipment. By the time you finally return to a castle, even the scratchy straw mattress feels luxurious, which is impressive, because that mattress still contains fleas. Army rations are rarely elegant. Bread, dried meat, onions, and whatever else can be carried or gathered along the way. Food on campaign is simple because it has to be. An army cannot carry delicate ingredients or complex cooking equipment. Everything must travel well and survive long journeys. Bread is the foundation. Large, dense loaves are packed into sacks and distributed to soldiers each day. The bread is sturdy, very sturdy. In fact, some pieces are so firm that they double as emergency building materials if necessary. Still, when you are hungry, bread tastes wonderful. Dried meat is another staple. Salted pork or beef can last for weeks without spoiling. It is tough and extremely salty, but it provides the energy needed for long days of marching. You chew slowly, occasionally wondering if your jaw muscles are becoming stronger than your sword arm. Onions appear frequently too. They grow easily and travel well. Sometimes they're eaten raw, sometimes roasted. Sometimes chopped into a pot of soup if a cooking fire is available. Speaking of soup, whenever possible, soldiers cook stews in large iron pots suspended over fires. Ingredients are thrown together, water is added, and eventually something resembling food appears. Vegetables, meat, herbs, possibly something nobody can identify anymore. But after a long march, it tastes incredible. Occasionally the army gathers fresh food from nearby farms or villages. This is politely called foraging. The villagers often use less polite words. Still, successful foraging might produce eggs, vegetables, or even livestock, which dramatically improves morale, because nothing lifts the spirits of tired soldiers quite like the promise of fresh food. And as you sit near the fire eating a bowl of slightly mysterious soup, you realize something important. Hunger makes everything taste better, even medieval army stew. Knights were expected to follow a code of conduct known as chivalry. This code encouraged bravery, loyalty, and protection of the weak. In theory. In practice, things were a little messier. Chivalry was less like a strict rulebook and more like a collection of ideals that society hoped knights would follow. Courage in battle, loyalty to your lord, respect toward women, protection of the helpless, honour in word and deed. Basically, knights were supposed to be the medieval version of honourable superheroes, but with more mud and significantly fewer capes. You first encounter the idea of chivalry during your training years. Older knights talk about it during lessons or meals, usually in the same tone modern adults use when discussing things like responsibility or character. At first it sounds simple enough. Be brave, be loyal, don't do terrible things. But as you grow older, you begin to realize that living by these ideals is not always easy. Because the medieval world is complicated. Wars happen over land disputes. Villages are caught in the middle. Alliances shift unexpectedly. And suddenly the clean, heroic image of knightly honour is forced to operate inside a world that rarely behaves politely. Still, the idea of chivalry matters. Ceremonies reinforce it. When a squire is finally ready to become a knight, the event is treated with great seriousness. Sometimes the night before the ceremony is spent in prayer, reflecting on the responsibility ahead. Weapons might be placed on an altar. Candles burn quietly in a chapel. It's a moment to think about the kind of person you want to be. The next day, the ceremony takes place. Your lord, or sometimes another respected knight, taps you on the shoulder with the flat of a sword. Just like that, you're no longer a squire, you are a knight. It's a powerful moment. The hall might be filled with witnesses, friends, family, nobles. Everyone understands that you are stepping into a role that carries expectations beyond fighting. Because knights are supposed to represent order in a chaotic world, protect travellers, defend the church, serve their lord faithfully. Of course, reality sometimes gets in the way. Knights are human, they argue, they make mistakes. They occasionally behave like people who've spent too much time wearing heavy helmets. But the code of chivalry still exists as a guiding idea. Something to aim for. Something to remind you that being a knight is about more than swinging a sword. It's about the responsibility that comes with that sword. which, if we're honest, feels significantly heavier than the armour. Faith played a major role in medieval culture. Church bells mark the hours of the day, prayers begin meals, and many knights see their actions as part of a divine plan. You notice this immediately when living inside a castle. Religion is woven into the rhythm of everyday life. Morning begins with prayer. Meals often include blessings. Church bells echo across villages and castle courtyards, reminding everyone that time itself belongs partly to the church. For knights, faith is not just a personal matter, it is part of their identity. Before battles, priests often walk among soldiers offering blessings. Some sprinkle holy water over the assembled troops. Others hold small relics, objects believed to have sacred power. Knights kneel as prayers are spoken, helmets tucked under arms, heads bowed. Because the truth is, medieval life is dangerous. War, disease, accidents. Life expectancy is not exactly generous. Faith provides a framework that helps people understand these uncertainties. If you survive a battle, perhaps it was divine protection. If someone dies, perhaps it is part of a greater plan. Whether or not everyone believes with equal intensity, the rituals themselves provide comfort. Some knights take religious devotion even further. They join military orders such as the Knights Templar or the Knights Hospitaller. These organisations combine monastic discipline with martial skill. Members live according to strict rules. They pray regularly. They own little personal property. And they dedicate their lives to defending Christian territories or protecting pilgrims. Imagine being both a monk and a soldier at the same time. It's an unusual combination, but surprisingly common in the medieval world. Even knights who remain part of secular households often maintain strong religious habits. Small chapels exist inside many castles. Candles flicker in quiet corners. Priests hear confessions. Soldiers pray before dangerous journeys. And sometimes, late at night, after a long day of training or travel, you might step into the chapel alone. The stone walls are silent. The candlelight is soft. For a moment the noise of the castle fades away. No politics, no armour, no war, just quiet reflection, which in the medieval world is a rare luxury. Armour requires constant upkeep. Metal plates dent. Leather straps stretch. Rivets loosen. In other words, armour behaves a lot like a complicated medieval machine that constantly tries to fall apart. After every battle or training session, the inspection begins. You remove the armour piece by piece, helmet first, then gauntlets, then the plates protecting your arms, chest and legs. Each section is carefully examined. Did a weapon strike here? Is that dent deep enough to weaken the metal? Did one of the straps loosen during the fight? Even small problems must be fixed quickly, because armour is only useful if it works exactly as intended. This is where armourers come in. These craftsmen are among the most important people in any castle or military camp. An armourer is part blacksmith, part engineer, and part miracle worker. They hammer dents out of steel, replace damaged rivets, repair broken buckles, and occasionally reshape entire pieces of armour after particularly enthusiastic battles. Their workshops are busy places. Fires roar in the forge. Hammers ring against anvils. Metal sparks flicker through the air like tiny shooting stars. The smell of hot steel mixes with leather and oil. You visit the workshop often, sometimes just to deliver equipment, sometimes to watch. Because armour making is fascinating. Each plate must fit the body precisely. Too tight and movement becomes impossible. Too loose and protection disappears. It's a delicate balance between mobility and defence. Maintaining armour also becomes a personal habit. You learn to wipe moisture from metal surfaces, oil moving parts, air out the padded garments worn underneath. Neglect these tasks and rust appears quickly. and rust unfortunately has absolutely no respect for heroic reputations. The same attention applies to weapons. Swords must be sharpened, spears inspected, shields repaired, because on the battlefield equipment failure can be catastrophic. A loose strap might mean a helmet falls off. A cracked shield might split under impact. So knights develop routines: clean, inspect, repair, repeat. It's not glamorous work, but it keeps you alive, which makes it extremely important. And honestly, after a long day of training, sitting quietly while polishing armour can feel strangely relaxing, almost like medieval meditation. Except the meditation occasionally involves hammering dents out of your chest plate. Even warriors need downtime. Evenings in the castle can be surprisingly lively. After a long day of training, riding, or managing responsibilities, the castle hall slowly transforms from a place of serious conversation into something closer to a social gathering. Fires burn brightly in large hearths. Servants carry food and drink across the hall. The long wooden tables fill with knights, nobles, squires, and guests. At first the atmosphere is calm. People eat. They talk quietly about the day's events. But as the evening continues, the mood becomes lighter. Musicians appear. Someone begins playing a lute. Another joins with a flute. The music drifts through the hall, echoing off the stone walls in a way that feels both festive and strangely cozy. Storytellers sometimes visit castles as well. Travelling performers who share tales of legendary heroes, brave knights, daring adventures. Dragons occasionally appear in these stories, even though most listeners strongly suspect dragons are somewhat exaggerated. But nobody complains. A good story is a good story. Laughter spreads easily during these gatherings. Knights challenge each other to friendly games. Dice clatter across the tables. Chessboards appear. Chess in particular is popular among nobles because it resembles a battlefield in miniature. Strategy, patience, planning several moves ahead. Of course, not everyone takes the game seriously. Sometimes the real competition is simply who can tell the funniest story about a training accident earlier that day. Food continues to circulate. Bread, roasted meats when available, bowls of stew, and plenty of drink. Ale flows generously in medieval halls, not because everyone is trying to party wildly, but because water quality is not always reliable. Ale is safer, which means enjoying a mug is often the sensible choice. As the evening grows later, the hall slowly quiets again. Some guests drift away to their chambers. Others linger near the fire, talking softly. For a few hours the pressures of politics and warfare fade. No battles, no training, just conversation, music, and the simple pleasure of resting after a long day. In a world filled with uncertainty, these quiet moments matter. They remind everyone that life is not only about survival, sometimes it's about laughter too. Knights must often travel quickly. Messages arrive unexpectedly. A sealed letter from a lord, an urgent request from an ally, or news of trouble along a distant border. Life in a castle can feel routine. Training in the morning, meals in the hall, equipment maintenance in the afternoon. But that routine can change instantly. One afternoon a messenger might arrive through the castle gate covered in road dust. His horse is tired, his cloak flaps wildly in the wind, and he carries a sealed letter. The message is delivered directly to your lord. The seal is broken. The contents read quickly, and suddenly the entire atmosphere changes. Perhaps a nearby lord requires military assistance. Perhaps bandits are causing trouble along a trade road. Perhaps a political situation has shifted and allies must respond quickly. Whatever the reason, preparations begin almost immediately. The castle courtyard fills with activity. Stable hands prepare horses. Squires gather armour and weapons. Servants pack supplies. Knights strap on equipment with practised efficiency. Within hours, what was once a quiet afternoon becomes a flurry of movement. You mount your horse. Your companions gather beside you. Some carry lances, others swords or shields. Everyone understands the assignment may involve days or weeks of travel, or danger, or both. The gates of the castle open slowly. The road stretches ahead across fields and forests. Behind you, the castle walls stand quiet and steady. Ahead lies uncertainty. But that is part of the knight's life. Orders arrive, journeys begin, responsibilities call, and once again you guide your horse forward into the unknown. Because in the world of medieval knights the quiet days rarely last long, and now the day is finally ending. The castle has gone quiet, the fires in the great hall burn lower, the last conversations fading into soft murmurs as people drift away to their chambers. Outside, the night air settles over the stone walls, cool and calm, the courtyard empty except for the occasional shuffle of a guard making his slow rounds. Your armour is finally off, which, if we're honest, might be the greatest victory of the entire day. The gambeson is hung nearby to dry, releasing the unmistakable scent of a long medieval afternoon. Your sword rests in its scabbard, freshly cleaned. Your horse is safe in the stable, probably sleeping better than you ever will, and you sink down onto that familiar straw mattress, still a little crunchy, still possibly inhabited, but tonight it feels strangely comfortable. You made it through another day. You woke up in a cold stone castle. You trained with weapons heavy enough to make your shoulders ache. You navigated the complicated world of noble politics without accidentally offending someone powerful. You ate stew that may or may not have contained a vegetable. You survived the possibility of tournaments, battles, muddy roads, and the occasional terrifying physics experiment known as jousting, and somehow you're still here. Which, in the medieval world, is honestly a very good outcome, because the truth is, life as a medieval knight was not the shining fairy tale we often imagine. It was exhausting, it was uncomfortable, it was dangerous, unpredictable, and frequently smelled like wet leather. But it was also a life built on discipline, loyalty, and resilience. The people who lived through those centuries woke up every morning in a world far harsher than ours. No electricity, no antibiotics, no hot showers waiting after a long day. Just cold mornings, hard work, and the hope that tomorrow might be a little easier than today. And yet they kept going. They built castles, roads, and towns. They protected their families and their lands as best they could. They laughed in great halls, told stories beside firelight, and found moments of peace in a complicated world. History is full of suffering and struggle, but it is also full of stubborn, hopeful humans doing their best. So tonight, as you lie there in a clean bed with soft pillows, steady electricity, and indoor plumbing that does not involve a bucket and a prayer, maybe whisper a small thank you to the people who came before us. The knights, the squires, the cooks stirring mysterious stews in castle kitchens, all the ordinary people who survived lice, leeches, mud and armour that basically functioned as a portable sauna. Because history may be messy, it may be uncomfortable, it may occasionally smell like a medieval stable, but it's also proof that humans are remarkably resilient, and sometimes a little ridiculous. Now the castle is quiet, the torches burn low, the night stretches peacefully across the countryside, so close your eyes, let the armour rest, and drift off knowing that tomorrow you won't have to wake up and climb into 60 pounds of metal. Good night.